What I think we're all trying to figure out is sort of where to put that on the number line, whether this is an aberration or whether this is the new normal for the type of thing that's going to be considered acceptable in civic opposition to the president.
Well, what's scary to me is that there wasn't more condemnation of this within the Republican Party. There was some,
sure,
but that there wasn't more. Where do these folks draw the line? If you'd thrown a rotten tomato at the president, would they have criticized that? How about if you'd thrown his shoe at the president? Would that be okay? They're basically saying, no, don't draw the line at heckling him. So where do they draw the line?
Right.
And eventually, if you say, well, there is no line, that's when you get to what happened before the Civil War, where you had physical violence between members of Congress on the floor of Congress. And we want to put some limits on that. And that's where this reprimand was a good thing, that the Congress took a stand that this kind of behavior not only violates House rules, and by the way, the Republicans often talk about the importance of rules. Not in this case. They just thought rules didn't matter.
Yeah.
Not only did it violate House rules, but it ripped at that fabric of civility that has always been essential for democracy. That's why they call each other the distinguished gentlemen. You know,
right.
Why did all that start? It was because they realized that within the government, in the sacred halls of government, you don't act that way. You can say something on the radio or in a speech. You can call the president a liar, whatever. Free speech. But there, we need some decorum so that our democracy isn't ripped asunder.
In terms of how this works, though, in political patterns, one of the things that we've seen is Republicans in South Carolina starting to say, yeah, you know, bring it on. Joe Wilson's a hero. This is going to be great. Keep him in the spotlight. It's really working for him. This is going to be excellent for him. Democrats are making a mistake by letting this get a lot of attention and by saying this is a big deal. When you look back at FDR, who you've just written a book about, how did he deal with Father Coughlin? How have presidents in the past dealt with, more or less effectively, their critics on the very far fringe? Well,
mostly by ignoring them, because if you engage them directly, you elevate them, and so you don't see President Obama, you know, going after Wilson. Roosevelt used a lot of humor. And he would give these kind of joking speeches that made sport of them occasionally. The right-wing congressman, he didn't attack radio hosts, but he would go after members of Congress sometimes, Martin, Barton, and Fish, and he just had a lot of fun attacking them playfully. And I think Obama also realized you need a little bit of a light touch when you're dealing with some of this, even if there's an ugly subtext to it, as there is in this case.
I want to get your reaction, John, to what I view as a pretty remarkable comment tonight from former President Jimmy Carter. It was an interview with NBC's Brian Williams, and they're talking about the opposition to President Obama right now. Check it out.
I think an overwhelming portion of the intensely demonstrated animosity toward President Barack Obama is based on the fact that he is a black man, that he's African American. And I think it's bubbled up to the surface because of a belief among many white people, not just in the South but around the country, that African Americans are not qualified to lead this great country. It's an abominable circumstance and grieves me and concerns me very deeply.
The implication being from President Carter, you know, sure, presidents all face opposition. A lot of them face unhinged opposition, but for President Obama, it's different because of race. What do you think about that comment and what the reaction to it will be?
Well, I think he's right. Not in every case. It's very important to say that many, maybe most people who oppose President Obama do not do so on the basis of race, but clearly a significant number, for a significant number, there's a racial factor. And I think you have to include Joe Wilson in that. If you look at his background, he was one of the big advocates of the Confederate flag in South Carolina. He thought that it was wrong for Strom Thurmond's illegitimate daughter to come forward because it was something to be ashamed of.
He said it was a smear, right?
And so there is some indication, I think Maureen Dowd was right, that when he said "you lie," it was almost like "you lie, boy." It does fit a certain pattern of Southern racism in this particular case. But it's important not to extrapolate that out to all criticism of the president. It clearly has added an intensity to this, though. If you're disagreeing about health care policy, this level of anger has to come from someplace deep and ugly in our history, and that, of course, race is the great stain on our history.
Jonathan Alter, Newsweek senior editor, MSNBC political analyst, author of The Defining Moment, FDR's 100 Days and the Triumph of Hope. It's always great to have you on the show. Thanks for coming in, John.
Great talking to you, Rachel.